colors, saved his brothers. They ended up in Egypt, just like Abraham had once ended up in Egypt, right? And it says that a new Pharaoh came to the throne who forgot all about Jacob. And the big takeaway from those first couple chapters of Exodus is that when Pharaoh forgets the covenanted identity of Israel, God still remembers. And it says that Pharaoh forgot, but Yahweh Tzakar, he remembered. And so you have the Exodus deliverance, the movement into Canaan, so that now Israel as a people is enjoying anew all of these Abrahamic promises. Land, protection, the land of milk and honey, so there's blessing. But the problem is that there are still these nations, and they didn't all get exterminated. Now, I don't think, as a matter of history, that there actually was.
I'm sorry. Was there actually other nations in that?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Israel did not get its work done, as it were. Yeah, there were Canaanites in the land,
right?
And which is why you got Joshua fit in the Battle of Jericho and all that stuff. But the tale of Joshua is that there wasn't a complete conquest. That it was left undone, so that there were still people in the land. There was this pronounced elongated conquest. Now, I'll say two things very briefly. We can talk about them later. I don't think, as a matter of history, there was a conquest like that was reported in Joshua.
Yeah.
So that I think that this is the ravings of ideology, and it tells us something. But I think that the cash out theologically in Joshua is that the conquest was not complete, that it was not adequate to do what it was ostensibly purposed to do. And so that what you still have is an Israel and nations, I'll just say the Goyim, in the same place. And this creates the seeds of contention. And it's the very seeds of contention that lead to the subversion of the monarchy. In fact, the monarchy is in many ways portrayed as itself a subversion. You get to that narrative in 1 Samuel, and Samuel, is freaking out because all the people of Israel say, we want a king, and the pregnant part of that is, we want one like all the nations, right? And Yahweh says, okay, give them the king that they want. Realize that they haven't rejected you, they've rejected me from being king over them. This is so tragic, right? So awful that we want to be pagans like all the other nations. And so this begins that story of the monarchy, and the story of the monarchy, soup to nuts, is this steady subversion of Israel by the nations. We wanted to be like the nations. We wanted the gods of the nations. We did this whole syncretism that Amos and Isaiah and Jeremiah and everybody else is condemning.
Setting up altars in high places.
Yeah. Well, and idolatry, and it's important to realize that idolatry in ancient Israel was never the renunciation of Yahwism to adopt another religion wholesale. It always involved syncretism. One of the great inscriptions that we still have, and it gives us a nice, lovely window on the religious situation in the northern kingdom in the 8th century. It's an 8th century inscription, still survives. It is a benediction. and it's I bless. What is it? I bless you by Yahweh of. Was it Tacom or something like that? I bless you by Yahweh of Tacom and by his Asherah.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that Asherah is pagan goddess, fertility goddess, is being depicted as a sexual consort or the wife of Yahweh, and it's a perfect illustration of the kind of syncretism that's at work in the northern kingdom that Amos takes a beat on and condemns explicitly. You know, I mean, and that's such I love the fact that inscription survives, because it's a perfect window on exactly what Amos is addressing. That Israel has brought pagan worship into its Yahwism, and that slurry of religious identities has corrupted Israelite religion. And the lesson of Amos is that you become like the gods that you worship. And of course, Asherah was, a god who coddled, the acquisitiveness and the sexual license of ancient Israel. And so the degradation of Israelite morality and the practice of injustice and inequity that led to the kind of economic depression that Amos beats the daylights out of, is you see a window that's exactly what was going on, right? So you get to the end of the monarchy is basically, the northern kingdom goes into exile among the Assyrians, and we get a little window on that story. But most of the Old Testament's focus, that happened, it's 8th century, so it's set beginning in about 734 and on. The northern kingdom goes into exile. Then the Babylonians start in the 6th century, so that by 586 is the big red letter date when that conquest is finally complete. And what ends up happening is as I said earlier, is this moment where you really get a nice window on it in the book of Jeremiah. And that's why I think, and I'll end with this before we go to lunch, because you'll begin to see how the seeds of this start to spring up in the New Testament. Jeremiah is in a situation where Yahweh has revealed that everybody's going into exile, and repeatedly Yahweh is saying, stop praying for these people. As a matter of fact, just if you do a concordance search and look up prayer or pray and chase that through the book of Jeremiah, and Yahweh is continually stepping in and saying, stop praying for these people. Don't pray for them anymore. I'm not listening anymore. They're going into exile. It's like this inevitability. And then you've got these false prophets that are channeling a couple of different impulses. Some of them are saying, no, it's not going to happen. Yahweh's going to leap in because of the covenant and protect us. The day, temple of the Lord is here, the temple of the Lord, right? And so God's going to protect us because of the covenant. And Yahweh's saying, no, that's not going to happen. There's another faction of Israelites that are saying, we're going to get up and we're going to conquer, and we're going to violently resist the Babylonians. And Yahweh said, no, don't do that. It's not going to happen.
And the prophets like Habakkuk said, the judgment artillery round is already out the barrel.
Yeah. It's on the way in.
On the way. Yeah.
So you get to the end, and Jeremiah receives the oracle. And you've all heard this before, but it's awfully important for an Old Testament ecclesiology leaping into the New Testament. Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. So Yahweh is sort of delivering this oracle ahead of the arrival in Babylon. This is the word that's going to go to those exiles in Babylon. Here's your marching orders. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there, do not decrease. This is Jeremiah 29, verses 4 through 7. And then here's the big one. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to Yahweh on its behalf. For in its welfare, or in its shalom, you will find your shalom, your welfare. And what I think is really awesome is that Jeremiah is really channeling that elemental identity of Israel in chapter 12 and at the end of Abraham's life in chapter 20. That this idea of Israel as a means of blessing, that Israel is truly itself when it becomes an agent, a vessel, a vehicle of Yahweh's blessing to all the families of the earth. Now, what ends up happening after the exile? Of course, one can't help but just gesture a little bit about some of the traditions. It's a much later tradition in the book of Daniel. But think about the Sunday school stories that you remember from the book of Daniel. What are the Israelites doing in Babylon? Who are the characters that we remember in Daniel?
Shadrach and Abednego.
Yeah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego doing? Staying absolutely loyal to Yahweh, right? Loyal to the law, loyal to their identity, possessing themselves, being Israel. And how does Nebuchadnezzar experience the presence of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Well, initially he's going to smoke him. But what's Nebuchadnezzar's decree after he fishes Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego out of the fiery furnace? You remember? Yeah. Or you look it up, because it's worth go all the way to the end. Who's another guy that we know in the Daniel story before the apocalyptic stuff?
Daniel and the lion.
There you go. That's the other one, right? And what's Daniel doing that gets him thrown in the lion's den?
Still continue to be obedient to God, so
Yeah.
that's all I've been.
He's keeping kosher, right? He's not eating the food that the king eats, and so Nebuchadnezzar's going to toss him into the lions. He's protected from the lions, and again, you get this oracle.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Not relevant to this right quick, but what is the time frame from Adam to Abraham?
Time-wise,
Yeah, time frame.
There is none.
yeah, it's
That's the
climbing-
point. It's not history.
Yeah.
Don't you,
right.
Yeah,
don't you,
there
don't
is
you,
none.
don't you know that the Earth is only 6,000 years old?
Well, I didn't find any time frame anywhere.
Yeah, it isn't. There isn't really a. Some people try to make it that way. There's some that are this kind of new Earth movement into that, but in fact, I mean, from our perspective, it's prehistory. So you just have an arrow that goes back. That's it.
Yeah, in the long ago and far, far away.
Yeah,
It's
it's
kinda-
once upon a time
because
in the
they-
Never Never Land.
You know,
That kind of thing. There isn't any.
Well, and But there's the actual guy that gives us the 6,000-year-old Earth was Bishop Ussher, who took his King James
that's right. He was
an Anglican, and gave us the 6,000.